Thank you, everybody who's joining us today. Welcome to the next episode of our Make Ideas Happen webinar series. My name is Katrina. I'm here from the Enterprise Support Team today. I'm also joined by my colleague Amanda. Say hey.
Hi.
And Enterprise Support Team here at Oxford Brookes. We're all about taking your passions, putting them into action, and supporting people to make their ideas happen. So today I'm delighted to be joined by the guys at CAUKIN Studio. Say hey.
Hey, how's it going?
And they're going to be chatting to us today about how to craft a successful team. A few bits of housekeeping. So throughout the webinar, do you remember that we've got the chat box and the Q&A feature. So if you've got any thoughts coming through, just pop them in the comments and we can start a conversation. Any questions, pop them in the Q&A box. And then we're going to have a Q&A session after the guys have finished presenting. And we'll hope to try and answer all of the questions that you've got in there. We're also streaming live on our Facebook page on Enterprise Support. So you are welcome to go and view over on Facebook, give us a like and a share on there. So that's everything from me. Pretty much over to you guys now. Thank you.
Cool, yeah, thanks for the introduction. We'll just share our screen 1 second. It's up, isn't it? Yeah. So we'll give kind of a quick presentation, talk through some of the work we've done today and how we kind of built our team to get there. I mean, we ourselves were, I suppose, in a position like a lot of maybe some of the attendees are in this call, in that we were at university, it was 2 years ago now. So we graduated from our master's 2 years ago. And we worked with the enterprise team at Cardiff, which is where we studied a little bit whilst we were there to kind of develop our business and kind of our thinking towards that, and then also use that resource and information to help us kind of build the team that we work with today. So yes, we are CAUKIN Studio. We are a collective of architecture graduates, architects, engineers, a various plethora of people that work in the built environment. And we design and build community projects all over the world. So things like community halls, kindergarten, schools, whatever it might be, wherever it might be. We usually take a team out there, design and build with a local community for a kind of a shared outcome. So we started this when we were in our second year studying architecture at Cardiff. Back then it was kind of a group of 5 of us that had this idea that we wanted to kind of put our summer after our second year into good use, and to maybe try and take the architectural education that we were gaining from university and put it into some sort of real world practice or situation that wasn't necessarily just sitting in an office for 2 months and doing a work experience. So something that might be a bit more hands-on and hopefully provide a bit more value to both us and a community, wherever that might be. So we started by reaching out to tons of NGOs, charities, organizations, communities all over the world, kind of cold calling and emailing and saying, look, we're this enthusiastic group of architecture students. We don't necessarily have loads of experience, but we'd like to kind of design and build something that might further your charitable missions or your organization's aims, whatever it might be. So I suppose after a lot of back and forths and speaking to various NGOs and charities everywhere, one of them got back to us and were really keen to kind of engage with the idea that we had. So that was Friends of Koh Rong, and they were a charity based in Cambodia. And they basically just set up a school on the island there, which was obviously to provide an education for the young kids, but was also to give them a bit of a place to go and be safe and away from some of the negative impacts that tourism was starting to bring to the island, such as kind of alcohol and drugs and those kind of negative things. So they said, yeah, we'd love it if you could build us a playground and sort of an outdoor classroom teaching space. So on the back of that, there was I think it was 12 of us in total, all friends from university, all studying architecture. Set out and went out there for 2 months over the summer in 2015 to design and build this playground. So this was something that we funded on Kickstarter. It was kind of reaching out to family and friends and as many people as we could. And I think the benefit for the charity was that there was no risk as far as they were concerned. All they had to do was kind of give us the land that was required. And we were saying, we're going to design it, we're going to fund it, and we're going to build it. So we went out there, had a really great time, built the project. It turned out really great. But I think one thing we learned massively about that project was that the complete success of it was completely based around the collaboration and the team that was involved, and that there was so much that we could learn as architecture students from local people who have all this rich construction knowledge that they know how to build. They've been building since they were young, their own houses, whatever it might be, and that that there was a lot of value that we could gain from that, but also that we could kind of hopefully teach some of the local people skills in design and kind of alternative methods for designing their spaces. So that we found this like nice exchange of knowledge between both parties, both the local community and the people we work with there, and our team as architecture students. And yeah, we just felt that we had to keep doing more of that, and that it was so valuable for everyone that was involved. So from there, we went on to build more projects in more places each year, kind of deliberately trying to scale up our builds in terms of their complexity, the impact they have on the community we're working with, design quality, build quality, all those things, trying to expand our knowledge and hopefully also expand the knowledge of the people that were joining in and the team that we were working with.
So sort of once we'd done that first project, it kind of became more apparent that we needed to come up with a system and build upon our team and work out what kind of network would be crucial to making a project run successfully and smoothly. So we kind of, over the years, narrowed that down to 6 key stakeholders. So the first of which is us as a facilitator. So that sort of first project, it wasn't with the idea of it becoming or turning into an organization or a company. It was kind of happened very naturally, and it really was just sort of a group of friends that worked well together. We all had the same sort of ideas and aspirations, and I think through that process of doing that first project, it became quite clear which of us sort of saw it as a long-term goal and a long-term career, in which who just saw it as sort of a summer one-off project. So I think coming out of that first project, there was 5 of us that were quite keen to keep this going and make sure that we could find a more sustainable way of running these projects. So initially, that first project was run through a Kickstarter campaign, and we'd kind of exhausted our resources, and it was sort of, I guess, time to shift it from an idea and turn it into a little bit more of an organization with a more structured approach. So our team has since grown from those 5 people. It's adapted over the years, and I think it's become more apparent what our individual roles are. So although all of us come from an architecture background, and at the time when we first started, we all had a lot of overlapping ideas and passions. As the years have gone on, it's become much more apparent about where our sort of core focus lies within the company. So, one of us would have more of a central role around the design aspect of things, making sure that we're reaching sort of high quality, exceeding local standards, and creating inspirational spaces. Whereas another team member is much more focused on sort of business strategy, finance, admin, legal work, and making sure that we're covered from a logistical point of view. And then the sort of third member of our team is then looking at our organization as sort of our ethos and our strategy moving forward, making sure that we're maintaining our original goals set out. So making sure we're still maintaining our impact, how we can increase that impact with every project and the more projects that we do. So I think when you're establishing your sort of core team, it's very important to work out what your different avenues and approach to the company will be, and what your individual roles, even though they may overlap, what your individual role and your main sort of focus is going to be in a discussion. So, typically we'll have multiple discussions every week, and by having different perspectives, it means that we can come to a final conclusion or decision that we know has been covered from all different viewpoints. I don't know if you want to add to anything.
Yeah. I think that those roles or positions that we now have within our team they were never something we set out to do. And I suppose, as Harry said, the more we've done projects, the more we've learned where our fit best was. We've also learned how to work with each other. And as Harry said, each of us are coming at every project or every decision we make, whatever it might be, with a different lens on it. And I think we found now, at least between the three of us who are working on this full time, we have quite a good method of pushing and pulling between those three kind of lenses and areas to come to a decision or to make decisions on a project, whatever it might be. But the other thing, so at the moment there's three of us working full time for CAUKIN Studio, and every summer when we upscale and take on more projects and go abroad and work on these projects, or even in the UK, we'll then also have an ancillary team who will be part of the studio for those 2 months or 3 months or whatever it might be that we're building on the location. So at the moment, I suppose our leadership team structure is usually you have 3 leaders on a project. So the first one is the kind of the main leader, makes most of the final decisions in relation to the build and logistics and all those sorts of things. We then have a second leader who is in charge mostly of the things that relate to site. So all the construction decisions, making sure there's enough materials there all the time, and essentially dealing with anything relating to the construction. And then we have a third leader who is the kind of, I suppose, pastoral care or pastoral leader, if you like. There's someone who is in charge of ensuring that all of our international participants are happy and having a good time, and that also there's really good integration with the local community and our team. So those, so every year our team kind of expands and contracts, and we go from a smaller core team throughout the year, and then when we take projects on, our team grows. And so obviously there's key characteristics that we look for within team members that we would hope to take away as leaders on projects each year. I don't know if you can talk more about the process or.
Yeah, and I think when we have a group of, let's say, 12 to 15 people on a project, it becomes quite quick to identify those which sort of take initiative, have that kind of right approach to working, and it's almost a blessing for us that our sort of pool of potential project leaders already have come on a project, so they already have an idea of what we do. They understand our approach to work, how we run these projects. So it's kind of like a very long process where we understand the candidates extremely well, but they also understand our process and our organization very well as well. I think moving forward, there's very few people that become leaders without having already gone on a project. So we're in quite a unique position there, where we're able to, really understand our team at a much sort of, I guess, deeper level.
Yeah, I suppose it's like a 2-month-long interview in a way. Although we never, we don't make it that. We obviously work with everyone that's on the project, and it's always obvious the kind of key characters within a project that shine through and kind of show leadership, initiative, or whatever it might be. And I think, although we have kind of defined roles to fill, the kind of 3 that I outlined on each project, I think for us, we look more for kind of character and drive and leadership within a person, rather than we look for someone to fill a role. So it's almost like if that person shows the initiative and the drive and the enthusiasm and has that kind of passion for the project, then they're kind of, they'd be great to have on our team regardless of what role they're doing. So I think rather than saying, okay, we need a marketing manager or whatever it might be, we just look for a person, a specific, that has those characteristics, and then fill the role that way, rather than just looking for someone to fill a specific role.
Yeah, I think often as well, we've never even seen the portfolio or the CV of the people that are working with us, which maybe it's because we've known them so well during that process, it becomes sort of secondary to to have to look through their drawings or their experience previously. It's much more about how they fit within our team. And I think as we move forward and grow as a company, our core team that works year round as well is going to start to grow. And the people we'd be looking to fill those kind of roles are people that have another viewpoint. So we talked about the three of us approaching decision making from different avenues. If we took on a fourth person or a fifth person, again, we'd want those to be people that have maybe a different way of approaching design or architecture or business, and may come from a different background. And so that we know that as we're building the team, we're building people a much more diverse team. So the second sort of key stakeholder that's crucial in a project. So on each project, we will partner with a local charity or partner, and this will be a charity or NGO that's been working within the area for a number of years. So they've built up that sort of trust and that network on the ground with the community, and they're responsible for identifying which projects have the most need. They're responsible for the local logistics, fundraising for the actual build, and doing that sort of on the ground communication in the lead up to a project. So it's they become a real key, stakeholder in the project. And without that link, then we'd find it very, very difficult to, one, find the projects, but also make sure that we have that kind of integration that's necessary for it to run smoothly and to have that kind of, real team atmosphere. So this is Rachel, who runs a charity in Vanuatu. She's spent a number of years living out there and built really good connections with a number of different, particularly one island. And after a cyclone in 2015, she went round to every single village, analysed the needs of each school, and then identified 2 projects that she was then going to she spent the last 4 years fundraising for. So we went out last year to build one of the schools, which is what Amanda was part of. So she's really been really great examples as somebody that sort of brings that link between our team and the local team. So, she knows the local language, she knows all of the key community members, and it means that any issues on both sides, there's then this sort of middle ground person that understands their culture, understands our culture. And especially with something like that language barrier, it really helps to integrate smoothly.
Yeah, and I think that I said about when we're looking for people to join our team, that we look for those key characteristics. I think that it's also, that rings true for when we're working with other NGOs. I think of all the projects we've ever done, every NGO we've worked with or every community partner we've worked with have had those kind of key characteristics. And I think that's saying something, in that the people that show that kind of passion and drive and commitment to the cause are the ones that will follow through us essentially, and will get a project done, and it will be so much more successful because of it.
Yeah, and I think they're often much smaller organizations as well than people realize. So with that organization, it's pretty much just Rachel on her own, and we have worked with some larger companies or larger NGOs, but the bigger doesn't necessarily mean better at all, and it can often be a lot more straightforward and a lot more, everybody's on the same page, the smaller the sort of organizations you're working with. The next main key stakeholder is the local community. So obviously everything that we're building, the design, the project, all revolves around the needs and the aspirations of the community. It's their building, it's what they're going to be using at the end of the day. So really it's got to satisfy their ideas, their climate, their culture. And so for us, it's a sort of a massive learning curve, and our sort of responsibility is really kind of taking the ideas of the community, of the NGO, of our international participants, and refining it into a workable design. So this year just gone, after we finished the Ranwas school in Vanuatu, we travelled up to Tanbok village, where we ran a design workshop to really sort of gain a much better understanding about how they run the school currently, what's currently missing, what their day-to-day schedule looks like, so that we could really add to the value of the project, understand the brief, and make sure it's perfectly suited for that individual village. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, I think obviously the community is such a key player in everything we do, and it goes back to everything being so much centered around collaboration and everyone working together, and everyone is inputting and gaining at the same level. And I think that's what makes a project successful, is that everyone's got to give to take, sort of thing, and no one's kind of everyone's on a level playing field and everyone's equal in the process.
Yeah, I think as well, with this photo, it kind of makes it clear just how many people are involved in a project. So let's say there's 20 of the locals up on site helping out on construction every day. It's not just them that's fully involved in the project. It's everybody back in the village as well. That's making sure everyone's well fed, everyone's happy, organizing events, making sure everyone's ideas are heard. So it's really becomes quite a village-wide or community-wide effort, which is it's really important. You've then got the sponsors and donors of a project. So this could come in two forms. It's either people that are inputting into the project financially, so to help cover material costs or equipment costs. And then there's also people providing their services pro bono. So this is often engineers or environmental design specialists who, again, add so much value to a project. So they've often people that have sort of years and years of experience working in structural engineering or design or passive design, and can really make sure that the buildings we're working on can withstand sort of, in this example, can withstand cyclones or difficult climatic issues, which could be really high humidity and is destroying books or learning material, removing or increasing sort of ventilation, natural lighting, so that there's a better learning environment within a school. And, with these kind of projects, you really have to analyze what value you can add and what value you can bring. So getting the right team in place and the right network or stakeholders is, the way in which you can do that. So the benefit of working with an organization such as ourselves is that we do have this network we can tap into, and a group of people that we can rely on to input these kind of ideas.
Yeah, and again, it all comes back to collaboration, and sometimes it's a case of understanding that within our team, within CAUKIN's team, we don't necessarily have those skills like environmental design specialist knowledge or structural knowledge, and that we can reach out to our network of collaborators and other team members and people that we've worked with before or know quite well to kind of gain on from their expertise and I suppose expand our network as much as possible. And again, that idea of giving to take as well is applies here as well. The engineers or the environmental design specialists we're working with get the opportunity to work on a project which might be kind of outside of their norm, and get the opportunity to work with a remote community and help out in that way. And by giving their knowledge and specialist knowledge, then they can gain in that way too.
Yeah, I think part of that is understanding that, let's say your team is 3 core people, which is what it is with ourselves, is understanding and identifying that, you're not going to be able to do everything. You're not going to have the knowledge to cover everything in your business. And I think that's fine. Like, you shouldn't aspire to have to do every single thing. Now we need to learn how to be engineers. You just got to identify what those missing parts are, and then, build your network of people that you can rely on to get those other aspects covered. The 5th key sort of stakeholder are the international participants. So these are often from architecture, engineering, design backgrounds, either students or graduates or young professionals. Although we do have people from other backgrounds or industries taking part, and they're really bringing their own viewpoint, their own knowledge. This is Amanda on the Ramwas project, looking like a crazy person. And they're Well, we recently worked out all of the different nationalities we've had come on a project, and I think it was 52 different countries, and it sort of shows the really wide variety of people that we can have on a project and what kind of different perspectives that they're bringing from their own cultures, and also what they can learn on a project. So they're bringing their sort of design expertise and knowledge, but in return they're learning these construction skills and, you know, the local culture and local climate from the local workers. And you get that really good sort of combination on site, and therefore the design output and the finished building has really sort of unique solutions and different, it's kind of using the same local techniques and skills, but introducing new ideas and new ways of doing it that come from, I guess, the education that our participants have.
Yeah, and that helps to kind of add value to the whole project, and also helps with engaging the local community as well, because in most situations the international participants will live with local communities. They'll have like a host family, or will live within the local community. So that really helps to facilitate an even greater engagement of the local community beyond just the building on site. There's all those off-site things as well. Getting stuck in with helping with the washing up or doing cooking or whatever it might be, really helps to gain that valuable community engagement.
And then finally, the last sort of key stakeholder are the local skilled workers. So with each project, we'll work with the NGO to identify a number of key people within the village that have previous experience of carpentry, that they know what kind of materials are available, how to use them, local techniques, and how that they can then implement those skills on the project, and how they can train local younger members of the team, so that everybody within the village is getting sort of upskilled and increasing their employability, but also passing on that knowledge to the international participants and ourselves as well. And so that as we've grown as an organization, we've pretty much gained all of our knowledge of on-site construction from these local communities. I think starting out, we were potentially fairly naive with the amount of construction knowledge that we had, but by working with local workers, it was very much sort of learning on the job situation. And when you're in that kind of environment, you are forced to learn very quickly. And I think now that we've done sort of about 20 projects, obviously we now have that knowledge, but even every single time we're still learning. There's still new obstacles and new tasks, new materials. And as part of that sort of the setup as well, we're trying to increase sort of women in construction. So at the moment, it's notoriously a very male-dominated industry, especially in a lot of the countries that we work in. It's very rare in some situations to find any females on a construction site. So part of that value that we can bring is trying to break down that sort of gender role stereotype. And with the international participants as well that we have coming, the vast majority are female, and they do lead by a great example. And so on this project in Zambia, we had a team of local workers working full time, and we made sure that 50% of those that were getting employed were female. And again, that with somewhere like a school build, that then leads by a good example with all of the children, that are seeing this every day and realizing that there are, countless different career opportunities that they could go into and pursue as they get older. And I think this is something that we're really looking to push much more on every single one of our projects. And usually we find that it's received very, very well by the local community. It's very rare that we get any pushback. And I think it's probably something that a lot of people have fairly strong feelings about already, but it just needs that sort of wheels to be put into motion to actually, get that sort of thing going.
Yeah, and within that, the local team that we talked about, we're also deliberately employing a mix of skilled and unskilled people, and it might be it is in the future that we can still identify those key characters within the local teams as well that will become our future leaders when we do further projects in these countries. So, for instance, in Fiji and Vanuatu, we'll have people that we worked with from the local community on the last project who will then become leaders on the next project. So I suppose the way we recruit, if you like, in that respect is quite unique because, as we said, it's like a 2-month-long interview in a way. But I think the thing that is applicable to everyone and anyone else's business is that it's more the characteristic of a person and the drive and the kind of commitment to a cause of each team member that we look for, rather than, you know, specific skills like they're good at construction or they're really good at design. That can be learned, but I suppose the character traits you know, can't be. So I think that for us is the most important thing. Is that, we stop?
Yeah, and sort of as we move forward as an organisation, we've been, you know, we've had a little bit more time on our hands recently. So we've been looking at ways in which we want to grow our impact and grow the organisation. And one of those is to set up satellite offices within these countries that we work in frequently. So the most obvious being the South Pacific in Fiji and Vanuatu, but also in Zambia as well. And as we move forward in South America. So in order for us to set up those satellite offices, it's really important that we identify those local skilled workers, which ones, you know, we want to take forward into, you know, longer term roles where they're then sourcing new projects. And the ultimate ideal situation is, you know, they can identify and run projects from start to finish without us, you know, even having to leave the UK, and it becomes a lot more sustainable within that country as well, and provides much more long-term job opportunities with the communities there. And our sort of, we're a little bit much more sort of hands-off approach. So that's kind of our longer-term goal, and by identifying that early on, you can then start to put things in place now. So we've already sort of picked out key people that we know we want to have involved on each project, with the end sort of idea that they could, you know, run these things
full time. Yeah, I guess stop there and then welcome questions.
Great, thank you guys. And on the last bit, it really sounds like you're kind of responding to the current climate and thinking about how you're bringing together like your international partners and your network. It was really interesting to learn about like how vast your community, your team is, and that breakdown of team structure. I think I definitely related to your point on team characteristics. I definitely think that is like the role within a team is shaped around the person and not the other way around. So yeah, I would definitely give that as a piece of advice. And it was brilliant to have one of our now team members featured in there, Amanda. So if you've got any questions for Amanda as you know, her role as being an international partner, then I'm sure she would be more than happy to take any questions on that. So I'm just gonna open up the floor now for any questions that you've got for ourselves or guys on anything that we've talked about today. I don't know, Amanda, if you've got any questions as well.
Yeah, no, I do actually.
You can kick us off if you want.
Thanks, Harry, for ruining my career. But no, I have a question for you. Thank you for the presentation again. Honestly, it was amazing just to kind of almost like reflect on everything that had happened last year. So that was really amazing. And I think I picked up on something that you said in terms of like portfolios and CVs, and that wasn't really like the central point of you kind of defining leadership roles within the project. So is that something that you could, or you would suggest to future employers in the architectural field, or somewhat of like a similar initiative? Like how important do you think portfolios and CVs are, like when applying for a job in that case?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I suppose that's where we're kind of unique, because as we said, we kind of get to interview people and get to know them a lot before we've, you know, seen their CV. So in conventional practice, I suppose your CV is definitely and your portfolio maybe is definitely your kind of first step in the door. So obviously there's an importance that it's of a high standard, it looks good, and I suppose the need is for it to get you that interview. But then once you've got over that barrier, then the most important part really is the interview and coming across well, speaking well, and just as we say, proving that, your character rather than necessarily always just your specific skills. I think, especially within, obviously I'm talking specifically for architecture here. There's especially within students of architecture, there's a massive thing about, I need to get loads of work experience, or I need to have loads of really amazing images in my portfolio, and it has to be so detailed, etc., etc. But the majority of employers we've spoken to before and know would say that they'd be kind of far more interested in the other things that you do outside of architecture. Obviously, yes, you need to prove you can draw buildings and have all those necessary architectural skills, but the thing ultimately that will get you a job in most scenarios is the other things you're interested in, that you can show that you're about more than just making nice drawings, I guess.
Yeah, no, exactly. I totally agree with that. And I think that kind of just, sorry, I have another question.
That's okay.
Onto something else in terms of like, kind of, I guess, taking on skilled and unskilled people within your team. Like, how beneficial has that been for you? And like, how does it make your team work? Because essentially, I mean, when you go into a job, they, I guess, only really employ the best of the best. So considering you take on like people that may not be particularly skilled, like, how does that work for you?
I think because we have a structure in place that enables I don't know if I call it like training of those people, is maybe slightly less of a risk, but we would want to have on a team somebody that can pass on their skills or their knowledge to that new member of I guess the team. So on your project, there was obviously David. So David started out as a project participant who signed up to one of our Fiji projects. We then invited him back as a project runner. So his role on that next project was much more sort of being that go in between person with not that much responsibility, but by having him there for that project, he was then effectively training up to gain that knowledge in construction and on-site skills, and how we run projects, so that then on future projects he could then step up in terms of responsibility. I think one of the benefits as well of doing it that way and taking on people that are somewhat unskilled is they also have they don't have a preconceived idea of how it should be done in their eyes. It's much more of a smooth learning curve where they don't, often you can employ somebody, and if they come from another organization that runs things very differently to us, then it can be a process of unlearning some of that stuff to then, weave into how we work. Whereas if you're bringing on somebody who's quite young, quite new and enthusiastic, so long as they have that drive to learn, then, it's pretty steep. And I think because we ourselves came from a point of not having that much skill, it maybe makes us a little bit more, empathetic towards that as well. Like we never had all of this knowledge or skill when we first started. So, why should we expect somebody else to have that in advance as well? Mm-hmm.
Definitely. I think that answers my question. So thank you.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So we've got a really good question from Olivia, who asks, this work looks fantastic and very inspiring. Are you running as a charity? How do you pay yourselves to sustain and build the business?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, so we are a limited company, a social enterprise. So something we're actually working towards is becoming a registered B Corp. I don't know if anyone knows what that is, but essentially B Corps is a movement of limited companies, or basically non-charities that set their goals to be both financially driven, but also in equal measure or in more measure impact driven. So it's changing your articles of association as a business to say that we're going to consider our social, environmental, or economic impact before we consider what our financial goals are. I think that we feel that the kind of idea and perception of charity within the public is in some ways outdated. And there's a really good TED talk by someone called Dan Pallotta who talks really well about this. And we feel that we can still operate as a company, but have all the impact and maybe even more that a charity might have. And because of the fact that, you know, we're kind of adopting that structure, I suppose it gives us more freedom to be able to implement new ideas without having that risk of a donor, for instance, kind of breathing down your neck and saying, oh, well, you know, you haven't created the impact or whatever. So I suppose we can trial more things and see what works and what doesn't, and grow from there. But in terms of how we pay ourselves and sustain as a business, I suppose we have these kind of two sources of revenue. So international participants that come away on our construction and education workshops pay a kind of course fee, which covers plenty of things, accommodation, food, etc., but also that education on site. So that pays for some of our time. And then all of the NGOs and organizations we work with also will pay like a design and construction fee, but this fee is far reduced from, you know, if on a typical project you paid a contractor, you paid an architect, you paid an engineer, etc., etc. Because we're delivering, I suppose, that entire service, the fee is far reduced, and because we have that other revenue from the educational course fees, it means we can reduce that fee even further. And that means then that the NGO or charity can put even more of their funding towards the physical materials and get a better project because of it.
Yeah, I think, that point about charities versus businesses, I think if, you know, with a business, there's always that mindset about reinvesting into the company and making sure that you're growing and growing by the fact that we don't have to rely on donations, which can come very sporadically and be quite an unsustainable source of income. Also, those donations, are usually for a specific thing or are earmarked for a specific project. So you might not be able to put that money, let's say, into marketing. Whereas in a business, you could say, okay, we're going to invest £1,000 into marketing, but in turn, that's going to bring us much more business. We're going to do more projects and have much more impact. So somebody, for example, could donate £20,000 and build a single building, or they could invest £20,000 into a company like ours, and then we could turn that £20,000 into 10 buildings. So it's trying to shift that mindset about donations having, you know, a singular output, which then sort of finishes at that one building. And really, if you run it in a way that a business would, you should be able to turn that initial input into, you know, 10 times more.
Yeah, and part of the B Corp movement, because part of the B Corp movement and getting that certification is that within your articles of association for your business, it has these written in stone sort of thing, so that, you know, we can't. Obviously, charities are heavily monitored as to how they spend their money, and companies might not necessarily be. But if you've got these statements around impact and measuring impact within your articles of association, then you can be held much more accountable. So it's kind of, that's the B Corp kind of monitors companies that want to work in a social and sustainable way, to kind of, you know, ensure that they are hitting the targets that they're saying they will, and they're not just saying they do just for the sake of it and not actually doing it.
Great, I think that was a good explanation. Hopefully that had answered your question. George is asking, just going back to characteristics again. You mentioned that you pick people who display characteristics you want to embed within your organisation. How do you decide on these characteristics to successfully identify your team members?
Yeah, I suppose, I mean, maybe it's a bit of a cheesy answer, but I guess it's based more on a feeling than anything. You know, some of the key characteristics are obviously someone who's a good people person, can communicate well. That's always a really big thing for us. especially when we're working in environments where communication is absolutely key and collaboration is really key. I think someone that really shows drive and passion to get things done, and that will work hard for a cause is really key. And I think often these kind of characteristics are hard to gauge if you're just meeting someone for the first time. But I think, if you work with someone on a project even for a week, you can already straight away kind of start to pick out those key characteristics within different people. And I guess, in an interview scenario, in a more typical job role, for instance, you might only have an hour to talk to an employer. But yeah, I think it is based kind of on a feeling of, this person does show that drive, and they kind of show the passion that they've got, what it takes, sort of thing.
Yeah, I think it's also not necessarily that we're looking for the same characteristics in everybody either. I think if we were, then we'd end up with a team that is all the same, and that doesn't really add much value. So ideally, in a team of 3 people on a single project, we might have somebody that is, very confident and capable at talking to a big audience of 30 people, but that doesn't mean that the other 2 need to be able to do that. It might be the case that somebody else is much better one-on-one and can, sort of seek out those people within the community or the participants that, need a little bit more encouragement or discussions one-on-one. And, that's a little bit more of their, route. So I wouldn't be worried about changing your own personality to try and think, fit what you think that they're looking for. Often, they could be looking for a whole host of things.
I actually agree with what Harry's saying so much, because when I was abroad, I think one of the things that I guess struck out most for me was the fact that you think you're one way when you're at home, but you're actually a completely different way when you go abroad. So I feel like a lot of it boils down to you, and you find yourself most importantly abroad and what you're actually capable of doing. So I definitely think that's a personality aspect. Sometimes it's not how somebody tells you that you are, it's actually how you discover that you are instead.
Yeah, definitely.
Can't agree more. We've just got time for a few more questions. I'm gonna go ahead and ask one. I know you mentioned that you used Kickstarter when you were starting out, and a lot of our businesses are looking to do that. So I just wanted to ask, what was your experience using Kickstarter, and do you have any tips for people considering using it?
Yeah, as a platform, it's very easy to use. It makes a lot of sense. I think there's a lot of businesses that have started up purely on Kickstarter, and we use Kickstarter to fund a project, but not necessarily the startup of our business. So I think businesses that are very product focused, so I don't know, maybe it's they're developing a new type of computer or a new watch or a bag, or I don't know, whatever it might be, often do quite well on Kickstarter, because obviously Kickstarter revolves around people donating or paying for a cause and then getting something in return. So yeah, obviously a lot of the businesses that do have that end product, maybe it's a revolutionary pen or something, will often do a lot better on Kickstarter. I think for us, we found it as quite it did well. We raised, I think it was £7,500 towards that project, the first project. But as we said, for us, it was quite an unsustainable way of continuing to fund projects, because, we've already asked all of our family, friends, extended friends, etc. We're only going to give once to that sort of thing. So yeah, in terms of tips for it, I think what helped our campaign a lot was that we had a video, as we had obviously a description, there's set things you have to have, images and descriptions and things, but we also did a little campaign video, which I think helped quite a lot, because it's a lot easier to relate to that than necessarily just some text and images.
People like to feel connected to the brand as well, but also not just the brand, but the people behind the company. So if it's like a faceless organization, people are much less likely to engage in it or, you know, want to buy the products if they know the team behind it and they can relate to them, or whatever, relate to them, then they're much more likely to sort of buy into that idea or that premise. So yeah, make sure it's something that we actually need to do more of. I think, you know, on something like our Instagram, it's maybe because we're camera shy, but, you know, it's just like, well, and, you know, anything really of us. But I mean, so some of the feedback we've got is that you do need to kind of break down that barrier of a professional face or body, and actually, you know, people are much more likely to.
Yeah, and that is also, you know, when it comes to talking maybe further down the line about investors and people funding your business, investors will always be looking kind of most at the team behind the idea. The idea obviously is a key part of it, but if the team that can carry the idea through can win over the heart of an investor, then you're more likely to be successful than if you've got a really good idea but you haven't got the team to back it up. I think that's important.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think, you know, you're investing in the person as well as the business, and just getting yourself out there, as you said, even on camera. You guys are doing so great today. You've been on the Instagram, now you're on Zoom. But that is really important, just to show yourself as a person, and see the personality that's behind the product, because your personality will feed into whatever the output is. So that's definitely something really important to take away.
Yeah.
So is there any final questions from anyone in the enterprise or anyone watching?
One we've missed from Farun said, would I be a member or partner of the company or employee of the company? I think that one for us, it's always a tough one, but I think that, you know, when we're talking about expanding our team, typically if you've got, you know, your shareholders within the company will be the ones that ultimately make the business decisions, and that's why it's always key that you've got shareholders that have those kind of different skill sets and lenses on all the decisions that are made, so that you come out with a more rounded decision. But I think that, especially for us, when we're going to be looking to, you know, expand our team, which hopefully will be fairly soon, with new employees, we'd definitely be looking at a model where we would obviously employ them as an employee, but give them also a part share in the company, so that I think that means that usually you're bringing on an employee, by giving them a share, they're going to have more of a commitment to the company and to the cause, and it's more of a long-term thing. It's not just like, I want a job here for a couple of years and earn a bit of money and then I'm going to go somewhere else. I think we definitely want to invest in future employees for the long run. So, and I think that giving shares as well as employment away is a really good way to do that. And there's plenty of different ways that you can go around that, and that's kind of gets into the legalities of shares and everything. But I think, yeah, employing people that are committed to the cause and to the aspirations of the business is really key, and trying to retain your employees for the long run it's got to be more successful for the business in the long run as well.
We've got a question that's come in on the Q&A from one of our students, Cecilia. It might be useful to read this, to have it on screen as well as reading it out. Just want to know if you guys are able to see that as well. But I will read it out, just a bit of a long one. So she wants to know, she says, for my master's thesis, I'm currently developing flexible, adaptable housing units in post-disaster contexts by addressing current social, economic and environmental issues. I was wondering, 1, what strategies do you adopt for reduction of costs on transport and materials? And how much do you import or how much do you use locally? 2, what are the key aspects to consider during the design stage in terms of climate?
Sure. So that's obviously quite an architectural one, and from an architect student.
Yeah.
So yeah, for us, all of our projects, it's a number one priority that all of the materials that we source and use are totally locally sourced. So I think our statistic, we've done six projects in Fiji, of which 80% of the materials came from within 50 kilometers of the site, and the remaining 20% of the materials came from no more than 250 kilometers from the site, and that is from within the country as well. It's just maybe it's come from another island within Fiji. So, and the reason for that is that once we've done a project, we hope that we can teach design skills and design replicatability in future to the community. But if we're using materials that are imported or aren't available locally, then that's not possible, and it stops there. So it's a kind of a number one priority that everything that goes into the project can be sourced as locally as possible. So I think to date, yeah, we've never imported anything from a different country. The only import if you like, is from another island within Fiji or another island within Vanuatu, but that's only because, especially in the case of Vanuatu, there was no hardware stores or nowhere to get materials on the island we were working on, so we didn't have a choice there. But so that's definitely key. What was the second part? What are the key aspects considered during design change in terms of climate? I suppose that's where we feel that as architects we can kind of add as much value as possible in terms of climatic design and design strategies. So it's making sure that we can observe and understand the local vernacular and kind of understand how buildings are made locally, how they're used locally within the community, and then kind of taking some of the key climatic strategies that we know as architects, like natural ventilation, trying to put humidity buffers in place, all those sorts of things to ensure we can add value through the design. So, be it bringing more light into the space, reducing the humidity, reducing the temperature, increasing ventilation, whatever it might be. We're actually doing a online course which we're going to release soon, which is going to be focused on post-disaster relief housing and developing strategies for that in the Pacific. So it's quite relevant, I suppose. It's what your question is about.
Yeah, I think what was it? A reduction of costs on transport materials. Yeah, part of it as well is, so if you know what materials are available and what skills are already available, then you instantly sort of bypass that need to import stuff. And I think maybe as part of the biggest challenge is, how do you use that same material and same skill level, but to combat something like a cyclone or a hurricane or some of these climatic issues. And that's where you can really add the most value. You want the building to be replicatable after after this first project. There's no point in importing something and then you can never be built again by the local community, or if it needs to be maintained, they can't buy that same piece. So it is a little bit about, like, obviously we collaborate with specialists to get that knowledge, but as an architecture student yourself, you have a certain level of understanding, and it'll be something that you might want to discuss with your tutors as well, specifically about what location you're working in. You can find a certain amount of information and detail online. You can look at photo surveys of buildings within that area and work out what's realistic that you could realistically obtain.
Brilliant, thanks. And it looks like quite a few people might be interested in that workshop that you just mentioned. So we can definitely give out some details of that for everybody viewing afterwards. I'm just going to wrap up on one final question because I'm conscious of time. So Barbara said, I feel that it's quite difficult to craft entrepreneurial teams. Can I ask what your experience of creating a good team in a social enterprise term was so far?
Oh, that's gone. There we go. Oh, what's the question? I hear it's okay. Yeah, so I suppose for us, it all happened very naturally. We started off as a group of friends at university, and then have kind of progressed within our roles from there. So we've never really, in terms of our employed and full-time team, we've never had to look elsewhere, I guess, because we've just kind of learned on the job and split off into our individual roles as we've gone along with different projects. I think something we are looking at now is to get a non-executive director board, so a board of people that have really extensive experience in different sectors. So one of those might be business, one of those might be architecture, and another one might be international development, for instance. And it's using them and using their knowledge and contacts as well to be able to build a team around that. And kind of, as I said, everything we've done to date, we've kind of learned on the job and made mistakes and then learned from them. So the idea is that by hopefully getting a non-executive board of directors, we don't necessarily have to make the mistakes up front, and we can kind of learn from their experiences rather than make the mistakes ourselves.
Yeah, I think making sure that your reasons for starting the business align with each other as well. I think if you can have 3 people that all want to do this business, but one of them is extremely money driven, that's the only thing that they care about. One of them is extremely focused just on creating impact, and they don't care about the money. That can work, but often that will cause just sort of difficulties. If you're all on the same sort of mindset with your aspirations, that you're in it for the long run, you're in it for the right reasons, then it will make the whole process a lot smoother. I think potentially that can be hard to identify early on if you don't know the person very well, especially sort of we've found that in a lot of companies people can change quite quickly as soon as you can know somebody as a friend, but then as soon as you're working with them it can be quite different. So working with your friends has issues for sure, and working with strangers that you just met will also have its issues. So I do get how much of an issue it can be, and I think we're very fortunate that the 3 of us work so well together.
I think briefly on that working with friends point as well, it's something we've learned to do, like to separate our business from our friendship, and that it's now, unfortunately we've got to a point now where we can argue endlessly about an issue to do with the business that can get quite heated in some situations, but as soon as the workday ends, that's it. That argument is left there, and it's to do with the business and not friendship. And I think that's something we've had to learn over time. And I think definitely at the start, if we were disagreeing about something to do with the business, then it would be sometimes taken personally as well. But that kind of helps. You learn that skill over time, which is definitely a key thing to working with you.
Thank you so much, guys. It's been a really interesting finding out a bit more about what you do and your team and all of the advice that you've given today. If we want to get in contact with you or find out more, what's the best way to do that?
Sure. So either our Instagram @CAUKIN Studio, or you can email us info@caukinstudio.com. And that's also where there will eventually be more details about this online course that we're just talking about. We hope to release it within the next kind of 2 or 3 weeks for it to happen over the summer months.
So it will be like a 5-week course with a commitment of sort of like 1 to 3 days a week. And then it will engage other industry experts and professionals, other architects, social entrepreneurs working within this similar field. And then each week we'll have a certain theme around community engagement, different ways of practicing architecture, and the whole sort of program will have an underlying project which is to do with post-disaster housing. We'll release that in a few weeks' time.
Yeah, and that'll be on our website as well.
Great, thanks. And if you want to find out more information on us at Enterprise Support, again, follow us on social media. We're also on the Brooks website, brooks.ac.uk/enterprise. And we'll be joined later this week by some more recent graduates. So for any of those watching today who are about to graduate, do tune in with us on Friday for how to succeed with personal branding. Thank you again so much to the CAUKIN team, and that's all from me today. Thanks everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Yes, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.